Align with the common good, the missing ethical principle of our times. The problem of global coordination is extremely complex. As a species, we face challenges of unprecedented scale and urgency. And how can any individual really know what to do in the face of this? We need a way to effectively coordinate, which rapidly solves our most pressing collective problems. So the climate crisis for sure, and potentially even graver risks from emerging technologies. And this principle, the aligning with the common good, is intended to help humanity self-organize effectively. It's a simple idea which may just serve well as a central organizing principle for our times. It's equally applicable to individuals, families, cities, nations, corporations, and alliances of organizations. And I believe it can guide our way to long-term collective flourishing. So let's break it down. Firstly, what do I mean here by the common good? Well, roughly kind of the thriving, flourishing, and sort of fulfillment of the potential of, well, all things really. The meaning is necessarily a bit fuzzy due to ethical uncertainties. But really, I'm referring to all of these circles. All in individuals, groups, races, nations. All sentient life, including all animals, all species. All ecosystems in the earth itself, and beyond that, future generations, which potentially outnumber us greatly and have no voice today. Also including sentient AI, if this comes to be, potentially with may be able to experience far more than us as humans in the future, and also aliens, civilizations from other worlds which may well exist as we plot our ascent to the stars. I think it's important to include other civilizations in our kind of ethical thinking. And although we have this ethical uncertainty, really the intention here is to be fully inclusive with the meaning of the common good. So to include all sentient beings and the integrity of all life. So aligning with, what does it mean to align with the common good? Roughly to prioritize the long-term common good over short-term self-interest. So the suffering of others matters just as much as our own suffering. Yet, as humans, we tend to empathize most with others who are similar to ourselves. So I'll attempt to illustrate this just by asking you to reflect on your own ethical priorities. So on what basis do you make decisions, like day-to-day decisions and important life decisions? To what extent do you include each of these circles, as well as future generations, aliens, sentient AI, in the kind of the rationale for your decision making? And just take a minute to reflect now. Like, for what purpose do you primarily invest your time, your energy, and your creativity? Which of these circles does it kind of gravitate towards? And for what purpose do you invest or spend or save your money? What ends is that serving? How is it split between different sort of circles here, different beneficiaries? And whatever groups you serve, yourself, your kin, other people or groups, entities that you care about. Just want to highlight here that their needs, your needs are legitimate, and we're all better placed to serve some groups over others. We're due to our personal relationships and our unique life and cultural experiences. And really, the kind of the underlying question I'm driving at here with aligning with the common good is, are your needs in balance with the needs of the whole? And put another way, how can we pursue the needs of the groups we care about whilst minimizing harm to others? So alignment with the common good is, in my mind, an ongoing process, and I suspect it will never be complete. And in this presentation, we'll talk through a few different sort of dimensions to kind of how to align with the common good and really bring this to life. So initially, fostering care for all, in many ways at the heart of this. We're going to take a couple of different dimensions of this. So for one, aligning with the needs of the many. So taking this from a very kind of logical stance initially, having kind of a long-termist sort of ethical principle, valuing future generations, really kind of respecting the maths around this, really, that there's potentially many orders of magnitude sort of more lives in the future than lives in the present, and those lives have no voice unless we kind of represent that voice. So just really kind of acknowledging that and leaning into the kind of the potential vastness of sort of value in the future, and respecting that. And on a more experiential level, aligning with the needs of the many, practicing compassion and loving kindness for all beings, whether that's in kind of a formal meditation practice or any kind of other practice in day-to-day life. So really, and with that, including future generations and sentient artificial intelligence, if it comes to pass, and alien civilizations from other worlds, sort of really kind of having this perhaps more expanded than usual sense of compassion for all beings, and nurturing that within ourselves. Another way to foster care for all, aligning our egoic selves with transcendent self. What on earth does that mean? So let's not get caught up in the language here. Really, I'm just pointing to sort of fostering a sort of sincere intention to kind of deepen our habitual state of consciousness. Very common and perhaps very effective, reliably effective for most people. Way to do this is practicing meditation and mindfulness. It's not necessarily for everyone, but for many, this is a pretty direct line to deepening our kind of habitual state of consciousness. And I mean, we can think of this as a kind of, most of us tend, and especially in the modern world, to kind of live in the in the waves, in the ripples of the ocean. We kind of caught up in this turbulence. We experience ourselves as separate entities, separate from the world, separate from each other, and there is a kind of a deeper way of experiencing oneself as, in this analogy, as the ocean itself, universal, inclusive, whole, complete, one with all that is, underneath the surface of thoughts and emotions and stories, and sort of connected in a profound and deep way, essentially where our identity, our notion of self, becomes one with the whole. It becomes one with all that is. And this is something that is usually a sort of a lifetime endeavor to nurture, but a very, very powerful way. We can start to actually experience ourself as the whole, ourself as kind of the underlying essence of all. It's a very powerful way to kind of foster care for all, by simply sort of nurturing our identity with that. Hopefully I haven't lost too many people on that one. So yeah, aligning with the common good, acknowledging moral uncertainty, really important, often overlooked. So kind of the attitude that I'm referring to here can be characterized as humility, really. Sort of assuming that we are at least partially wrong in how we view the world and how we view what's right, and being willing to try on other perspectives. I mean, I really don't think anyone's got the whole picture here. We all are clouded by our own particular masks, our own particular sets of experiences and cultural conditioning. And really, this is kind of not to impose our views on everyone else. And taken at a different angle, acknowledging moral uncertainty, we can embrace this in the sense of a collective mission to get to what's been coined as the long reflection. The long reflection is kind of potentially an extended period of deliberation, maybe even tens of thousands of years, for us as a species to kind of deliberate and sort of work out what's most important, before we commit to sort of an irreversible path into the deep future. And this notion of the long reflection also is sort of having eliminated risks, existential risks that could, permanently destroy our long-term potential. So kind of we're talking about a time where we are safe as a species to take our time with this deliberation. And whilst it's perhaps not on the radar of global priorities at a national and international level, this notion of a long reflection, I think, is a really powerful way of us to kind of practically, embrace our moral uncertainty whilst working towards something that is actually somewhat tangible, collectively, as a whole, united. So aligning with the common good, another way, balancing sacrifice with mutual benefit. This is pointed to some tricky parts of our reality, really. Let's just take for example, yourself as an individual. You're probably familiar with sacrificing short-term gratification for longer-term benefit. I choose not to binge on the cookies, so I don't feel grim and fat and unhealthy and get diabetes when I'm older. And I think this has a really close parallel to like that kind of, this is a very kind of close personal example with a much more macro pattern that we're experiencing sort of at the species level. So one dimension of this, sacrificing the needs of the few for the needs of the many. It's kind of something that I think for many of us feels awkward. Is it even right to do that? For sacrificing the needs of a few people, a few hundred, few thousand, few million people for the good of a nation or the world. It's tricky, and I just want to acknowledge this is essentially what our governments do anyway. Like it's not necessarily highlighted, but this is the outcome of the decisions that are made. And not just government, any sort of powerful actor is informing these kind of collective outcomes. Who wins, who doesn't. Another dimension of this is, sacrificing the needs of current generations for the needs of countless future generations. Not how we tend to view the situation, but acknowledging again that there potentially is many more lives in the future than there are in the present, and I think in a very, very real and direct sense. This generation, our generation, those that are alive today, whilst we often think of our needs as being of the utmost importance, I think maybe a more accurate framing is that our needs are a constraint on the needs of future generations. The degree to which we're willing to sort of sacrifice some of our more destructive behaviors sort of directly correlates to kind of the potential for future generations to flourish. And we're in that situation. It's we need to acknowledge it. It's real. So we've said a bit about sacrifice, but in practice, I doubt that we'll be particularly willing to sacrifice very much as individuals, as nation states, as corporations, as sort of as cultural groups. Maybe that'll come. But I think it's perhaps wise to kind of emphasize and put the focus on mutual benefit. And I think there's a huge amount of room for us to align with the common good through mutual benefit, minimizing the need for sacrifice by aligning what works for us as individuals, as groups, and for others, and for other species, and for the planet, and for future generations, and just trying to kind of line up these kind of win-win-win-win-win scenarios and actions. Yeah, so coming on to like aligning with the common good, like through sort of aligned lifestyle, really, like trying to make some of these kind of win-win-win scenarios a little bit more tangible. Not saying these are kind of the right things or the right things for everyone. It's just kind of a sort of a pointing in the kind of direction that might make sense, really, in many cases. So for one, our diet is a really, really simple and direct way that many, if not most people, can sort of directly align with the common good. If we eat sort of plant-based, whole food diet, ideally organic, locally sourced to the extent possible, not only does it promote our own health and longevity, it avoids the suffering of farmed animals, minimizes the carbon emissions from transporting food long distances and going through sort of heavy industrial processing, minimizes non-recyclable waste from excessive packaging to enable that transport, Support sustainable land use, less area per calorie, less water. You don't need to feed animals to feed us. It's just much more efficient, and potentially, depending how the farming is conducted, very potentially more enriching for sort of biodiversity and soil quality, as well as buying locally, supporting sustainable businesses. So there's these kind of very many virtuous cycles just to making a simple sort of lifestyle choice around our diet. Spending time and money, another great example. Again, fairly simple. Just take stock of what you're spending on, really. Reducing financial spend on kind of distraction, short-term gratification, and this would be more relevant to some than others. Particularly those that are on, in the 1% are relatively high disposable income. There's many of us that are really stuck on this on the treadmill. We work to earn, to consume, and it takes up all of our time, and then we need to work harder. And it's this crazy thing. Just step off. If you can afford it, just go to a 4-day week or a 3-day working week. You don't simplify. Just simplify. Spend more time with family, playing, learning, growing together. Devote more time to meditation, spiritual practice, gardening, being in nature. Nature. Our world is a bit light on truly, deeply wise humans, I believe, right now. But nature is an incredible teacher. We can learn all we need to learn from nature, I believe. If we pay attention. Tech detox, just switch your phone off. It's very simple. Very simple. Just start to reclaim your attention. Potentially choose or explore the possibility of living in intentional community, potentially with the intention to kind of deepen loving presence and service to the whole. We can do an awful lot together. We can really support each other. We thrive in community, in wise community, and to a large extent we've lost that in the modern world. It's nuts, but we can reclaim it. There's no reason why not. If you can afford it, buy some land. If you can't, move into an existing intentional community. Be a steward of the land. Start building, creating spaces for belonging. An effective contribution, support priority causes. Yeah, well, priority causes, it's an interesting one. It's just leaning into this notion that some things that we can do, some modes of service can be many times more impactful for the world in a positive way than others, and that's not normally obvious. So that this could be, I think there's still quite a bit of work to be done, research to be done to understand what are the top priority things that we can do as individuals. But that research, it's coming. In no small part, focusing on supporting initiatives that kind of work on the sort of structural or systemic leverage points. I'll say more about that in a second. So that could be volunteering, it could be donating a portion of your income, or if you're in a position to, even aligning your own career with something that is truly and deeply impactful for what the world needs, helping to align us collectively with the common good. Which brings us on to aligning structural incentives. I think being realistic, we're not all going to just off our own back and start moving into intentional communities and living off the land and living lightly. It's more complex than that, and there are certain, well, let's just look at some examples. National governments and regional governments tend to prioritize their citizens over the citizens of other nations and regions. It's kind of a direct disconnect, or a direct misalignment with the common good. On top of that, ruling parties in democratic nations tend to prioritize re-election to a degree over almost anything else. These are structural problems. It's not pointing the finger at any one person. It's the way that the incentives are set up in our global institutions, in the way that kind of the sort of structures of our civilization are. So it's the rules of the game, essentially, that we need to change. Corporations are, in the main, legally obliged to prioritize their shareholders over any other group. This is madness. This is madness. This is deeply misaligned with the common good. And whilst any given company can voluntarily serve other stakeholders in a somewhat more balanced way, like this should be law. This like, it's mad that we are allowing such deep destructive disservice as the norm. In sort of overall, we need to incentivize powerful actors to prioritize the long-term common good over their short-term narrow interests. And it may seem impossible. This is huge. This is enormous. I mean, there are quite a few clever sort of institutional and governance innovations that may be able to play a kind of a really important role here. I don't think there's a silver bullet, but many things together might start shifting this. But what can we do as individuals? Where can we put a focus? It's something that I think is perhaps much more tangible, much more sort of accessible, is to start paying attention on changing the narrative, changing how we're relating to this situation, to the structures that we're embedded in. So I'd like to introduce this notion of a culture of enough. In the words of Gandhi, the world has enough for everyone's need, but not everyone's greed. I mean, humans actually need very little to thrive in reality. An implication of aligning with the common good is to fulfill our own needs and the needs of others in a minimally harmful way. So what does it mean for you to have enough, for you to do enough, for you to be enough? As individuals, when we feel that we're enough and we have enough, typically we kind of tend to overflow with kindness and generosity to help others. So what would it mean for your nation to have enough, to do enough, to be enough? What would become of your national identity in a culture of enough? So I invite you to dream with me here, and just imagine in the not too distant future your nation's priorities naturally shifting to serving the common good. Living in a more sensitive way need not be a sacrifice. It can be a source and a path of our collective liberation. Thank you, and I really appreciate any comments that you like to share.